So thank you for the presenters for sharing their stories about their farms. I'm going to ask a few questions for the panel, and then we're going to open it up to the crowd. So I guess I want to start with, this is more of a question for the farmers. Farming is maybe not traditionally, but certainly contemporarily thought of as a more rural, isolated endeavor. What do you, as putting on your farmer hat, what do you think the best part about farming in the neighborhood is, and what's your least favorite component?
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I actually think the social interactions, I mean, at one hand, I love that I get to talk to everybody as they come by, and I get into deep conversations all the time, and that's awesome that I have that kind of community thing going on, but at the same time it makes it so hard to actually get anything accomplished. So I would say that's two-part.
Yeah, I can second that feeling. I definitely really enjoy the interactions that I have with the neighbors. I have to say, every day that I'm out there, I have at least 3 people stop by and just chat or say hi or just check in to see what's going on. And I really appreciate those conversations. But at a certain time of the day, in the morning when I'm getting a lot done, sometimes that can make it difficult to get work done. But I think the other major difference from rural farming that urban agriculture has to deal with, I mentioned it already, just that we have residences all the way around the farm, and 50% of the residences are vacant, and we do have a lot of people coming into the neighborhood and dumping construction waste and such in these vacant lots in the lots behind the vacant houses. And that it doesn't make it look very attractive, and we also have, the wind and the rain comes and blows this trash into the lot. So that's been a big challenge, and I think something I really want to work on. And I think it's something that we can't work on alone. We have to bring the whole community into this, and so that's where the Greater Greenmount Community Association and just the neighbors in general around the garden, we're really trying to reach out and work on doing some education campaigns around proper trash disposal and recycling, and to reduce dumping, calling 311. So, yeah.
So, and this question is more for Sandra and Teddy. As leaders who've been in these communities for a while, before these farms got started, you probably worked with a lot of community gardens before in the neighborhood. What is different about having a farm or a place that defines itself as a production farm that's different than your experiences with community gardens?
Yeah, we in the community I live in, we have a lot of gardens. Because there were so many empty lots. We had to come up with something to do with the lots because they were dumping, and a lot of drugs was hidden underneath the trash. So we had to come up with something. So there's a lot of beautiful gardens. So it was really nice when Cheryl and Alicia came and wanted to do something different. We have way too many flower gardens. We're lit up. So I just felt like we needed some food somewhere. We need to be able to go find some food somewhere. So having this garden, this is our first in the neighborhood, a food garden. So.
Yeah, we also have a community garden immediately next to the farm, which is really the first kind of community project to revive life on Whitelock Street after the stores came down. So to tell the truth, people still call the farm the garden. There's really not, in the neighborhood, they're just the garden. But I think it's certainly the fact that in the community garden, there's a pretty tall fence that goes around it. There's a lock on the front. You have your individual plots, whereas immediately next door at the farm, it's really open. It's a much more of a communal project in that you're not actually assigned a specific lot. You are not responsible for your actual, production. In that sense, it's more of a group effort. A lot of people will come and say, well, I really just want to grow whatever, broccoli. I say, well, we're not actually growing that now. That's a bit of a difference.
Great. So again, to kind of play into that community garden versus production farm, it seems like both of the projects have these really social missions. How do you figure out what you do with your produce? Do you have a decision-making process? Do you have goals that you say, 60% goes here, 40% goes here? How do you deal with that balance of your social mission with your financial sustainability as a production farm?
Yeah, I guess I can start. Well, so currently we're not financially sustainable. We've gotten a lot of grants, and all of the grants we've applied for have been under the fiscal sponsorship of the Greater Green Mountain Community Association, because we're not a 501c3 at this point. We didn't really see the need to put the energy into going that route, because there was so much energy that needed to go into building the farm in the first year, and so we were really grateful to their really strong support of us and always encouraging us to go for grants, and the community association would do anything they could to support us in those efforts. So everything all the money we spent on the farm last year was from grants. We did have some sales from the produce that we did grow, and the events that we went to. We made about $1,000. So that's really not enough to pay anyone for the amount of time that we've spent building the farm. So we're working towards expanding really at this point, just so that we can try to build more financial sustainability and hopefully create a job at least out of the produce that we're growing. But because, like you were saying, that there's a social mission as well to bring food into the neighborhood. We don't want to exclude the food from the neighborhood. So our goal is to have a weekly market in the neighborhood. Last year we did it for about 2 months, but this year and we weren't very consistent with our timing, our day and our time of day, just because our schedules weren't so flexible. So this year we're really hoping to have a weekly market at the same time on the same day of the week, and that's really important to us, because we want the food to be there for the neighborhood, and so even if we were at maximum capacity and growing as much food as we possibly could, I think it would still be difficult for us to be financially sustainable. So I think it needs to come first that we are going to be there providing food for the neighborhood, and we're going to have to supplement that for now with grants, because there is a social mission and there's other activities that we have to do to keep the whole project going that require grant funding.
Yeah, I guess just to add on to that, I try and think of the first flow of food kind of stays in the neighborhood. It goes to the market stands, it'll go to the corner store, it goes to the healthy cooking class at the rec center. So it kind of stays in the neighborhood, and then any overflow goes to restaurants or the Waverly or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the farm has also successfully completed a Kickstarter campaign last fall for $10,000. We've also tried to sell plants, so creating alternative revenue streams has been important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was.
Okay. So this term food desert is something we've heard earlier tonight. It's something that is certainly heard about a lot these days in the media. In fact, very recently there was a New York Times piece, I don't know if anyone on the panel read it or in the audience has read it, trying to kind of debunk the notion of a food desert. And I'm kind of curious how the panel feels whether their neighborhood's a food desert, if that's an accurate term, if they like that term, and how you think urban farms fit into this concept of the food desert.
Is that
It's for
anybody? Well, for me, I look at it as preserving. When in Eastern Shore, when I was coming up, we had to preserve foods for the winter. So, and that's how I look at it. It's like preserving.
The farm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If we looked at the map that Amanda showed earlier, then our neighborhood is in a food desert. That's defined by the Center for Livable Future. We do have we have 2 corner stores, or 3 corner stores in the neighborhood, I think. And there isn't a lot of fresh produce in the corner stores.
No.
So to me, it feels like this project is definitely having an impact in the sense that we're bringing fresh food into the neighborhood. And both at the community garden and at the farm, I think it's equally, really, both of those are really important in bringing the fresh produce into the neighborhood, because people are getting excited about growing the food. And for people who aren't really gardeners, there are people who are just excited about buying fresh produce. So it goes both ways. They're different. So there's different activities for different customers.
We're actually currently doing this community food assessment with Center for Livable Future, so we're getting to find out some of the answers. And what a lot of people will say when you ask them, where would you be most likely to get fresh produce in your neighborhood? Well, first they'd kind of laugh, and then they'd say the farm. And I think that the fact that the farm is 2 years old, just 2 years old, it's become that kind of institution. So certainly there's different definitions of what neighborhood means. There's lots of different names to call the few blocks around you, so you can have kind of different interpretation about that. But I think that, as I said in our presentation, it's as much about the lack of food as it is about the lack of kind of social options. And I think that you could call it.
Also, just, starting a farm in a neighborhood doesn't mean that you're automatically going to eliminate the need. I don't know if I said that right, but I just mean that there's multiple levels that need to be dealt with. There's like the educational stuff, like making sure that people know how to cook the food, and like what do they have at home that they're actually able to cook it with, and do people even know that they need to be eating vegetables? There's just like all of these things, and like the access, so like they can't come to the market stand, so that's why we're trying to put it in the corner store, and then that way they can actually use WIC to buy it. So there's like all these different things, these like different access points, and just growing the food right there, it's not gonna solve all the issues.
Right.
And I would just add on to that, when that New York Times article came out, certainly people were calling the center and asking us, what do you think about this? And, you have food desert maps out there. Do you agree that they don't cause obesity? And our response is it's a really complicated issue. The map is just one way to look at it. But what it does do is it becomes a policy tool. And just like you were saying, the farm is engaging the community in a really important way. It is getting fresh produce out there. But there's all different sorts of levels of change that need to happen. And having something like this map that the city now can back and say, we're going to target these neighborhoods with different programs, or helping, maybe have corner stores have refrigeration. So I think it's a valid tool. I'm glad that the center is doing these community food assessments, because we're getting more depth than a lot of other places are. If we just did a food desert measurement, we wouldn't really know, but we've found from ground truthing it that this map does seem to be accurate. These are areas that are lacking options of healthy food. So, and the farm is like a nice portal entry for a lot of people to start talking about the issue.
So now we can open up to questions from the audience.
Yeah, I was just really curious about the kind of supply and demand thing at local stand, weekly level. Do you have enough demand? And if not there, do you have any problems like getting rid of your access at the end of the day to the restaurants or whatever? How does that play out on a ground weekly type level?
So I'd say that last year, we did have a lot of leftover produce. I mean, there was a lot being sold, but it was still kind of slow for people to catch on. And so a lot of the produce, since we were all volunteers, I just didn't have time to go around calling a bunch of places to unload it. So I would just take it all to the soup kitchen. And so that would be kind of like my next spot. This year, I'm really excited to say that on Saturday we actually sold out of all of our produce. I could not believe it, and I harvested a lot of produce. It was something like 60 pounds, or no, it's probably more. I don't remember, but it was a lot. But yeah. So but this year, since I am producing a lot more food, I'm having to definitely. It's not going to all be able to go to the neighborhoods. I do have to go to restaurants now and try and find people to buy it.
And Waverly Farmers Market.
And the Waverly Farmers Market, which will be starting in June. The Farm Alliance will be there weekly. So all of the urban farmers that are part of the alliance will actually be selling food together at the Waverly. So that'll be exciting and very helpful for all of us.
Yeah, I can just quickly say that the demand in our neighborhood at the markets that we would do where we just walk around was mostly from the grandmothers. There was, we really had excited kids who were happy to work and get, some fresh peppers and tomatoes and just eat things off the vines as we were working out there. So that demand was really great, but to see, but there was a gap between from 16 to, I would say, 35, 40, where it was really a difficult audience. And that may be due to people not cooking as much at home, or there's so many factors that we've already kind of been talking about. But the grandmothers were really excited, and so we met a lot of we learned a lot about what people wanted. So it was an interesting experience for us. But at that point last year, we were not at our full capacity and whenever we had excess produce, we would go to events or we would do value-added products. We would make value-added products. Eliza would help out in that department. That way we would have things preserved and we could sell them at a later date. So that's what we did.
Yes, have either of you considered putting some fruit trees in and stuff like that, so you'd have more of a perennial focus and have a broader range of produce to sell?
Yeah, we don't have room for trees on our lot, but we've been putting lots of berry bushes all the way around the lot.
And we're putting fruit trees along actually other lots on Macon, on Whitelock Street, just the other side.
Yeah, we also don't have a ton of space, but we were really excited about our lot has a slight slope to it, so it just kind of made sense that at the bottom of the slope to have trees and bushes as sort of a living fence is what we've been calling it. So we are trying to create like a living fence around the site, and we started with one side last year where we planted about 10 fruit trees, or between last fall and this spring we've planted about 12 fruit trees of all kinds of varieties. So we probably won't have a significant amount of much of a crop. I don't know, at this point I don't know what it's going to be like at a market, but it'll be exciting, I think, for people to see fruit growing in the neighborhood. So.
Just had a question about, in particular, you mentioned something that's come up in my research a lot about people don't have things to cook with. And is Center for a Livable Future looking at that? Do you know, what do people have? I've run into, they don't actually have butcher knives or a cutting board. So have you examined that? Or?
The question is about whether people have the proper paraphernalia and utensils and things to actually cook, and whether there's research or work towards that.
And not exactly. Through the community food assessments, that's a question we can ask people. But it hasn't really been dealt with, and we know it's an issue. I think part of the problem is with the assessments is we don't want to have too many questions. So that's one we just felt like we weren't able to take on. But we have heard anecdotally, as I'm sure other people have, that the lack of cooking utensils is just as big of an issue as the lack of cooking knowledge, so.
And we actually are specifically asking like 15 questions, so I guess we
You
have.
guys are.
Yeah,
So
we go
let's-
through colander,
let's see how it
steamer
goes.
basket, cutting board, knives, stovetop, rotisserie, cooker. We've got a refrigerator, deep fat fryer, George Foreman grill.
It's chopped, it should be published in the next month. Michael Nairn is one of the leads on it, and that's exactly what they did, was they did an assessment of Philly.
We have time for one more question.
Was there anybody?
Anyone else?
Okay. Well, I don't want to drag down the tone right at the end here, but, everybody has their own opinion. And so the more people, the more opinions. So when you're in a city, you're inevitably going to run against people who like what you're doing or who don't like what you're doing. So I'm just curious what, if any, have been the negative reactions or problems that you guys have had from people not liking what you were doing, if any at all.
Yeah, so like at the very beginning, so last year, actually no, in 2010 we built a hoop house, but that was before we were actually producing any food, and so a lot of neighbors were like, what is that thing, and it's ugly and we don't really want it here. And so we were like, explained what it was, and then, asked, well, what would you like to see here? And they would say, well, we want flowers and stuff. We want a lot of flowers. So that's what we're doing this year, is actually planting a ton of flowers. But those people that didn't like the hoop house have really come around and are really like huge supporters of us now. And have even apologized. Do anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that just in general, communication is always going to be a big concern because we're not out there all the time, because there are a lot of questions, and certainly when you see an activity that you're not used to seeing, you're curious. And I think that by now, 2 years in, most people know that we're in it for the right reasons. But when you first start, you're not really sure, why are these people working here? Are they going to take over the whole street? I'm not sure if I like this. So certainly, as I said, the fact that now most people in the neighborhood probably know who Elisa is because she's the most visible person in the neighborhood, that helps a lot. But certainly at the beginning, there are questions about cleanliness. Farms are dirty places, especially when you're not totally in vertical rows and everything. So it takes a little bit of time to get over that.
Yeah, and I think, us being a little newer, I think we've more recently probably experienced those things. I would say in the beginning there was just a lot of curiosity, I think, and a lot of questions that came from people about what we were doing and what is it going to be like, and I didn't take that necessarily. I think a lot of it was just curiosity, and there wasn't a lot of negative reactions initially, but I do think Sandra kind of mentioned that there are a lot of the vacant lots that have been turned into gardens are beautification projects. So they have lots of flowers and trees and look really nice. And one of the challenges with taking care of this lot, especially last year when Elisa and I were working full time in the beginning. I cut down to part-time, but through the summer, but it was really challenging to maintain the grass around the farm. And so the grass did get really high by the middle of the summer, and I think the complaints might have started rolling into the community association. And so they gently came up and told us that there were some people who were unhappy with the grass. So for us this year, we and actually last fall we did plant a lot of tulip bulbs in the front of the lot. So this spring there was a nice bloom of tulips that did look really nice. But we are working on maintaining the lot in a more tidy way, that just people like to see grass that's cut very neatly, and we haven't been able to accomplish that completely yet, but we're working on that.
Maybe if you just put down bushes. What do you need for?
Yeah.
City help us get bushes?
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming. Thanks again to Future Harvest, United Way, Able